Hello and welcome to Dialogue. On April the 8th, Wuhan marked its one-year anniversary of release from the lockdown implemented to stop the spread of COVID-19. After an arduous 76 days, Wuhan was able to defeat the virus and get back on track to normality. And so, what is life like in Wuhan nowadays, and how can the city's experiences and recovery provide hope for places still hit hard by the pandemic? To find out more, I'm joined by Professor Jiang Huigeng of GNS Research Center at Wuhan University, Dr. Dennis Carroll, President of the Global Virome Project, Dr. Hua Chenzhu, Associate Professor at the State Key Laboratory of Emerging Infectious Disease at the University of Hong Kong, and Zhou Weichan, MD, PhD, and Distinguished Professor of the MD Anderson Cancer Center. That's our topic. I'm Zhou Yue. But before we start the discussions, let's take a look at the satellite maps of Wuhan from February 2020 to show how the city has been coming back.
This heat map shows Wuhan during its lockdown in February 2020. With no one outside and few factories open, the satellite image reveals a city in darkness. In the first quarter of 2020, the output growth of all industries in Wuhan sharply decreased, with one exception only: the local tobacco industry. People smoked more cigarettes, perhaps due to their anxiety or fears over the lockdown. The area pictured almost completely lacking in heat is Qingshan District, known as the 10-Mile Steel City. It's home to the famous Wuhan Iron and Steel Corporation. But, by August, the industrial park significantly warmed up as it resumed operations. Another important industrial zone, Hanyang District, also slowly regained its former vitality. Like the industrial sector, Wuhan's service industry is also slowly ticking up. The number of orders placed by Wuhan's residents on the food delivery platform Ele.me has still not returned to pre-pandemic levels. In many ways, recovery in Wuhan has been more difficult than in other major cities in China. During the lockdown last year, Wuhan's residents were extremely worried about their food supply. They purchased a lot of high-carb foods on Ele.me, such as peanuts, pancakes, corn, rice cakes, noodles, and potatoes during the lockdown. After the lockdown, the foods that became the most popular included coffee and bubble tea, which indicates that the normal lives in this city gradually returns. How does a city with a population of more than 10 million recover economically after a 2-month lockdown? A rare positive indicator for Wuhan was the Optics Valley's GDP growth of 5.1% in 2020. This is Wuhan's Optics Valley, an area of high and new tech industrial cluster. It was deserted during the pandemic, but the traffic flow is now returning to pre-pandemic levels. Emerging technology is the most promising field of Wuhan's development. In July 2020, the high-tech manufacturing industry grew by 26.2%, 27.2 percentage points higher than the total combined growth rate of the city's industries. Wuhan's darkness on the satellite map at the start of 2020 represents the toughest time for China's economy. But its luminosity, which is increasing day by day, is also an indicator of China's brighter economic future.
The luminosity of Wuhan is coming back, and now let's talk to Mr. Geng. Mr. Geng, I know that you've been working at Wuhan University, and today is the one-year anniversary of Wuhan's unblocking. So could you please tell us how Wuhan is doing right now?
Hi. So I think Wuhan City has been restored to the normal conditions just before the pandemic. I think the only difference now here for the Wuhan people is whether you are wearing a face mask or not. Mm-hmm. But I think the physical and the psychological distances between the people are close again. I'm not saying that we are not doing a good job in preventing the contagion, but that we have been relaxed from the tension of the pandemic and restored our belief in our friends, loved ones, and those around us. You know, during the lockdown last year, we have to stay at home, and we are forbidden to enter any public facilities, and we have to stay around the neighborhood, and we have to do the shopping. Mm-hmm. Shopping have to be made by volunteers. You know, the psychological pressure was huge, and everybody was concerned about whether their loved ones could go through the pandemic situation and whether their business could be destroyed by the spread of the COVID-19 virus. But nowadays, you see, from my personal experiences, I can go anywhere I want, just like what I did before the pandemic. You can see the food courts, shopping malls, grocery stores, and cinemas are all open to everybody, and we have a lot of people there. And it seems that the pandemic never happened. I'm not saying that we forget it or we don't care about the virus, but that we are enjoying the normal life and we have come down from the panic caused by the pandemic of COVID-19 virus. So here I want to say the most important thing for us in Wuhan City is that the belief in our lives and the loved ones have been reestablished and reinforced. So we have the belief that the Wuhan people could overcome the pandemic and any difficulty in future, and the pandemic made the Wuhan people stronger in confronting future unknown threats.
I
learned a
know.
lesson that we.
Yeah, I know that Wuhan underwent a very stringent 40 days of lockdown. But what is amazing is that since May the 19th last year, Wuhan has seen no new local confirmed cases, although it is the place where the first cluster infections were reported. So can we say that Wuhan has come back to pre-COVID time? Everything is back to normal?
Yes, I think so. This is very encouraging that we don't have any local cases to be captured in Wuhan City in the past year. I think that's because of the good management by the government and the people here in Wuhan. They are observing the rules. For example, keep distances between the people and wearing masks. I think that's a good signal for us to go through the pandemic and to face the future. To go back to the normal conditions of our life.
And schools and universities around the world are struggling whether to open their campuses or not. You work in Wuhan University. Can you tell us what about your campus? Are students and teachers feeling safe living and working and studying?
Yeah, actually, since last September, the Chinese students from all over China have come back to the campus and taken courses. So the university is monitoring their health conditions, and the people who catch a fever will be quarantined for a while and take various tests to prevent contagions. The only problem is that international students from overseas cannot come back, and we have our classes to be recorded or streamed online for them, so they will not lag behind. But anyway, the students are advised not to go outside to areas with many people. However, the young people, I think, even from those areas outside of Wuhan City, they think that Wuhan is the safest place now. For our academic activities, I think most research meetings are held online, and we don't need to go to travel to anywhere to go to put forward our research activities. We can have more time to stay in the university to do research, and rather than going to travel. The only problem here is that we have no way to go abroad to attend international meetings.
Okay.
But international collaboration is still possible through online meetings. So I think we need to keep open to the joint activities in even during the pandemic situations, and so to have that kind of activities to be held online.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Geng, for your words from Wuhan. Now we have Dr. Huacheng Zhu on the line. Dr. Zhu, there is a recent study by the Chinese Academy of Medical Sciences. They announced their results in The Lancet. It shows that the neutralizing antibody in Wuhan population is actually quite high. In April 2020, the seroprevalence antibody rate in Wuhan was maintained at 6.9%. What did this say about infection in Wuhan in the early months?
So I would say that based on the results reported in this Lancet paper, I think that actually the asymptomatic infection and also those with very mild signs of infection may actually serve as a big source of the infected cases. So yeah. So I think that it indicates that apart from those that have already been confirmed, there's more people that has already been exposed to this virus.
And this pattern actually stayed all over the world. Asymptomatic infection is still the most prevalent thing that we see around the world, right?
Yes. Yes, I think that's probably part of the reason why this virus can become a pandemic. Because if a virus only shows very significant pathogenicity, then it will be quite easy for you to identify those infected person and then isolate them. But if the virus can have a very wide range or a wild spectrum of the disease symptoms, then it will become very difficult for you to make the diagnosis and to identify those infected person and then isolate them. So that is why the virus is so smart and can spread itself in such a way.
And the Chinese study published in Lancet also pointed out that those antibody will stay in humans' body for at least 9 months. That's natural infection results. Does that mean if somebody's got infected, he will be immunized until at least 9 months later?
Yes, I think that is probably part of the good news. So we know that if a person after infection, they can maintain the antibody level with a high titer, then that may indicate that this antibody may protect the person from the second chance of infection. But I know that there's still a small proportion of the people or the population, they cannot produce high antibody level. So this kind of person, they may have a second chance for the infection. But overall, if the antibody can be maintained for like more than 9 months, that would be a good news even for our vaccination. So we can expect that probably we can, we do not need to reboost the person before they get their antibody level dropping down.
So do you mean those who have already have neutralizing antibodies should still take vaccines?
I don't think so. The best way is that
to ensure that there is safety and to be able to convince the public of the safety. And right now, AstraZeneca is struggling to be able to build that kind of awareness as to how safe this vaccine is.
About the effectiveness of the vaccines, the Chinese vaccines is also in the spotlight. Joe, you've mentioned before that the international public opinion has been arguing the Chinese vaccines phase 3 data disclosure is not complete. A month ago, I talked to the Sinovac CEO. He said that their company is pretty open with their data of the clinical trial in the beginning. What is the reasons that the international community is still about doubts about the Chinese vaccines data?
Well, one of the reasons is that the data was released in different period of time and not in a very consistent way. And plus, I would suggest that Chinese company should publish the paper in a peer review in a reputable international journal. Because when you publish scientific field, we all know so-called peer review, which is an expert to review it and to, in fact, is criticize it and tease out what's the strength and what's the weakness and what's the significance of this product, such as vaccine. By that way, the scientific field will recognize this paper is trustful, and so the community, international community, will feel much more confident about this product. So I do feel that phase 3 study, as long as we finish one study, should publish in peer-reviewed journal.
Okay, you're saying it's not peer-reviewed, but the consistency of the data, Mr. Yin of the Sinovac said, they deliberately try to test it out in different regions and areas, so the efficacy rate is different in different parts of the world.
Yes, it's not a surprise the efficacy is different in different world, because different world have different incidence, infection rate, and also may have different variant domain. So it's not surprised that had different efficacy. The important thing is you need to design a way to publish and to explain why in this particular area is higher, why another area is not efficacy is not as high as another area, and then publish the total efficacy. I think that part should be designed ahead of time, and then let the public know based on scientific point, which is a certain time, certain events you need to report. So that part is very crucial for Chinese community or Chinese company.
And Dennis, about the WHO's traceability report, about whether the Wuhan labs engaged in virus work are well managed or they have high quality biosafety levels. The introduction of virus through refrigerated food is considered a possible route. The statement said it leaked from the lab is extremely impossible, but still many Western countries and even scientists have doubts about that report. What do you make of it?
Well, let's be very clear. I personally doubt very strongly that this was a lab-released virus, but it was really important for the WHO team to have full and open access to all aspects of the laboratory procedures and to be able to critically evaluate. And what we
Why
didn't
did you
see,
doubt it could be a
was the kind
possible
of
lab
open transparency you would expect. Well, because we see these events of what you would call spillover of viruses from wildlife into humans. Those are not infrequent events. And as such, it's the COVID-19 virus. It would be perfectly consistent with what we've seen with other viruses of this type, that it's a natural event. We saw it with SARS, a similar coronavirus. We've seen it with the MERS virus, also another coronavirus. So there's a long pattern of spillover events that are natural. But being able to prove this really required the WHO team to have absolutely unfettered access to the raw data and to be able to have really the ability to investigate everywhere they needed to go. And I think we saw some constraints, both in terms of the availability of the raw data and the kind of open and transparency that you would really expect an investigation of this type to be able to have. So I think the doubts you're hearing expressed aren't so much statements that it was a laboratory or not a laboratory released virus. It was that the investigation didn't have the kind of openness and transparency and access
and Dennis,
that really needed to be had.
Is it possible
So
that even
in many ways,
with extensive research and the data they have gathered so far, it is still not feasible to have a solid conclusion where this come from?
you can have a much more sort of confidence in the data if you had access to the data. You're never going to have 100% assurance, but you can have a very high reliability in what it is that you can conclude. And right now, quite frankly, there's still more questions than answers. And ultimately, you want to weigh the scale so that you have more answers than questions. And this investigation raised more questions than it did answers, and that's unfortunate.
All right, we're running out of time. Thank you very much, Joe. Thank you, Dennis, for your insights. You've been watching Dialogue here on CGTN. I'm Joe in Beijing. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.